welcome to reform thinking. If you want to completely flip how you view reality, you don't need a massive telescope.
Right. Or, a particle accelerator or anything like that.
Yeah, you just need to translate one single three-letter Hebrew word correctly. And that is why we are here today.
That is the whole mission for this deep dive.
It is, because you handed us this massive stack of lexical sources, theological dictionaries, grammatical analyses, and all of it is focused entirely on one target verb.
Just one word.
Right. And I have to admit, when I first looked at your notes and saw that we were going to spend an hour dissecting the ancient equivalent of the verb to be, I thought, well, how is this going to sustain a whole conversation?
I know. It sounds like the driest possible linguistic exercise. Analyzing the verb to be is the kind of thing that makes high school English students just fall asleep at their desks.
Right. I mean, I was bracing myself for a very boring grammar lesson. But then I started reading the material you sent over, and you were absolutely on the money to point us in this direction.
Because it's not a grammar lesson at all.
No, not at all. It is a collision of two entirely different ways of understanding the universe. So for you listening, the word in question is the Hebrew verb hayah. And just to establish the sheer footprint of this word in the biblical text, our material notes it occurs approximately 3,750 times.
Which is huge.
It is the second most frequent verb in the entire Old Testament.
Yeah, which means if you are reading the Hebrew text, you are tripping over this word on almost every single page.
You literally can't avoid it.
Right, it forms the structural backbone of the whole language.
But here is where we have to completely reset our Western expectations. Because when we translate hayah into English, we default to the verb to be, like I am, you are, the sky is, the car was.
Right, very standard.
We think of being as a static state of existence. I like to think of it like a paused frame in a movie. You look at a still photograph and you make an observation. The man is tall.
He is just sitting there.
Exactly, nothing is happening. But the analysis you provided reveals that hayah is highly active. It means to fall out, to come to pass, to become, and to happen.
And that distinction, the difference between the paused frame and the moving picture, that is the whole ballgame.
Really?
Yeah.
Why is it such a huge deal?
Well, because our English language is heavily conditioned by centuries of Greek philosophy.
Right, the Greeks.
Yeah, in ancient Greek thought, ultimate reality, true being, is motionless. It is static. To the Greeks, if something changes, it means it is either getting better or getting worse, which means it wasn't perfect to begin with.
Oh, I see. So change implies a flaw.
Spot on. So perfect being is a frozen, timeless state. But the Hebrew text operates in a completely different universe.
It's way more kinetic.
Yes, in Hebrew thought, existence is kinetic. It is a condition of motion. Understanding this one word, hayah, literally shifts our entire view of biblical history, God's sovereign decrees, and how he interacts with his people.
So let us unpack this active nature of existence first, because, it took me a minute to wrap my head around it. Looking at the primary definitions from the lexicons you sent, hayah translates to be or to exist, but they insist it frequently means to occur, to happen, or to become.
Yeah, the entry specifically says it indicates an event falling out or coming to pass.
We can see this very clearly when we look at how it functions in specific verses. Take the very first chapter of the Bible, Genesis 1.5.
Oh, that's a great example.
Right. The English translation usually says, and there was evening, and there was morning. But look at the underlying Hebrew. The text says, evening came.
The word there is hayah.
Yes. It is not simply stating that evening existed in some abstract philosophical way. It is describing the actual event of evening occurring. The day transitioned. A happening took place.
It's an event.
Right. And we see that same kinetic energy in Jeremiah 14.4. The text says the rain came. And in Amos 3.6, a disaster occurs.
And if we just use our standard English, we lose all that.
We do. In a flat English translation, we might say there was rain or there was a disaster. But that just drains all the action out of the sentence. Going back to that movie analogy, if the English verb to be is the paused frame, the Hebrew hayah is the movie actually playing out on the screen in front of you.
The film is rolling.
Yes. The rain is actively falling and hitting the dirt. The disaster is actively striking the city. It is a dynamic occurrence happening in real time.
And that concept of the movie playing out helps explain how hayah links a subject to a condition.
How so?
Well, it does not just hand you a factual resume about a person or a thing. It describes a condition in active motion. Look at Genesis 3.1.
Okay, the serpent.
Right, the serpent was crafty.
Right.
The hayah there implies that the serpent was actively behaving in a crafty manner. is not just a personality trait sitting dormant in his brain.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it describes his characteristics manifesting in that very moment.
That makes so much sense. And you highlighted another fascinating example in your notes regarding Genesis 2.18. It is not good that the man be alone.
Yes, Adam in the garden.
When I first read that, I thought it was just an observation about Adam's geographical location. Like, oh, look, he is over there by himself.
Right, like he's just sitting on a rock.
Yeah, but with Hāyâ, it is a statement about his active existence. His living out his days in a state of isolation is what is not good. The actual mechanics of his daily life unfolding in solitude is the problem.
Yes, the being alone is an activity he is engaging in. And this kinetic idea of existence connects directly to how the biblical authors structured their storytelling.
Wait, really? It affects the whole narrative structure.
Absolutely, because if existence is essentially active and unfolding, then history itself is not a collection of dates on a timeline. History is a series of these active occurrences coming to pass.
Okay, so if this word turns history into a moving picture rather than a photograph,
Yeah.
how does that change the way the writers actually put the narrative together? Because you pointed us to a very specific form of this word that shows up everywhere in the narrative text.
Yes, the word wayhi.
Right. In English, it often gets translated as, and it came to pass, or simply, and then. The sources you provided indicate this specific sequential form is the formal sign of consecutive narrative in Hebrew storytelling.
It is essentially the grammatical hinge of the Old Testament.
A hinge. I like that.
Yeah, the lexical entries point out that wayhi formally indicates the progress of the narrative. You see it in Genesis 39.11, and it came to pass. It moves the plot forward from one distinct event to the next.
What I found fascinating in the material you provided was the statistical breakdown.
Oh, the word counts.
Yeah, linguists literally count the frequency of wayhi to measure how narrative a biblical book is. The numbers in the notes were wild. They show that Ezekiel actually has the highest frequency of wayhi, followed closely by Genesis and Jeremiah.
Which tells us a lot about the genre of those books.
Exactly. So if researchers see a book using this form constantly, they know they're reading a sequence of events rather than just abstract poetry. But I want to pause and challenge this for a second. Let us play devil's advocate.
Okay, bring it on.
If wayhi just translates to, and then it happened, does that imply history is just a sequence of random disconnected events? I am thinking of a little kid telling a story.
Oh, like, and then.
Right. And then we went to the store, and then it rained, and then I saw a dog, and then my shoe fell off. It sounds completely arbitrary. How is, and it came to pass, any different from saying stuff just happens?
I see why you would make that connection, especially since in English, then carries that haphazard connotation. We've all heard kids tell stories like that.
It's exhausting.
It is. But we have to look at the theological weight behind the Hebrew grammar here. In the biblical worldview, history is completely devoid of randomness.
Okay.
It is not blind fate, and it is not arbitrary chaos. History is a deliberate, orchestrated sequence of God-ordained happenings coming into existence.
So it's very intentional.
Highly intentional. The repeated, relentless use of wayhi, and it came to pass, reinforces a worldview where history unfolds precisely according to divine decision.
So it is not a kid rambling. It is an author executing a script.
Spot on. The lexicons note that even in banal, seemingly everyday historical events, like those mentioned in Ecclesiastes 1.9, Hāyâ indicates the dynamics of occurrences ordered by God.
Even the boring stuff.
Even the boring stuff. The biblical writers use this grammatical form to string together events that are all under the umbrella of divine providence. History is the theater where God's decrees are realized in space and time.
So nothing just happens.
No, nothing just happens. Everything comes to pass because it was decreed to come to pass.
Man, if every historical event is a script being executed by God, what happens when a word is spoken into that script? Specifically, words of blessing or curse.
That's where things get really intense.
Let us look at the dynamics of blessing and curse, because your notes highlighted this as a very specific, implicit theological usage of Hāyâ. I am so used to thinking of a blessing as someone saying, I hope you have a good day, or I wish you well. It is just a sentiment.
Right, like writing in a greeting card.
Yeah, exactly. But in the ancient Near East, and specifically in the biblical text, a spoken blessing or curse is not a sentiment. It is an exertion of force. And Hāyâ is the engine driving the reality of that spoken word.
Let's look at the text.
Okay, take Genesis 12.2. God tells Abraham, you will be a blessing. Or look at the terrifying curse in Jeremiah 20.16, that man shall be like the cities Yahweh destroyed. In English, you will be. Sounds like a simple prediction of the future.
Like a weather forecast.
Yeah. But the lexical dictionaries discuss how Hāyâ expresses the inner dynamics of a blessing or a curse. It does something completely different than just predicting.
It releases an energy that presses toward realization.
It presses toward realization.
Yes, when God speaks a blessing, it is not an abstract wish that he hopes comes true. It is a declaration of destiny taking effect. The blessing inherently contains the authority to bring about the state it describes. It is put into motion the absolute second it is spoken.
Wait, I need to push back on this. Because if a blessing releases an energy that presses toward realization, does that mean humans can just speak things into existence?
I know where you're going with this.
Yeah, because that sounds dangerously close to a name it and claim it magic spell, where you just say the right words and the universe has to obey you.
That is a crucial distinction to make. The text takes it completely out of the realm of magic. In a magical worldview, the spell itself has independent authority.
Like the words themselves have juice.
Right, the words float out into the universe and the cosmos is forced to respond. But in the biblical worldview, the blessing or curse has weight strictly because of the personal agency of the one speaking it, or the one backing it up.
Okay, so the power is in the speaker, not the syllables.
Exactly. And this is where the grammar you pointed us to becomes so illuminating. When God speaks a blessing, the hayah is often in the imperfect tense.
Okay, stop there. What does the imperfect tense actually do in Hebrew? Because honestly, I barely remember English grammar tenses, let alone ancient Hebrew.
Fair enough. In English, our verb tenses are primarily concerned with time, past, present, and future.
Yesterday, today, tomorrow.
Right. But Hebrew verbs are primarily concerned with the state of completion.
Okay.
The perfect tense describes an action that is finished. The imperfect tense describes an action that is incomplete or still unfolding.
Can you give me an analogy for that?
Sure. Think of the imperfect tense like kicking a door wide open. The action has started, but the process is ongoing and things are still walking through that door. It is forward-looking.
I love that. So when God gives a blessing using the imperfect tense of hayah, he is kicking the door open to the future.
Yes. A blessing in the imperfect tense becomes an ironclad promise, and a curse becomes a threat that God himself will actualize in the future.
Give us an example from the text.
Think about Genesis 15.5. God brings Abraham outside, tells him to look up at the night sky and count the stars, and says, "So shall your descendants be."
That hayah guarantees the certainty of God's spoken word.
Exactly. It is not just God predicting a biological outcome based on probability. It is God stating that he is actively working in history to ensure that outcome comes to pass. He is the one actualizing it.
He is the one making the movie play.
Yep.
The blessing guarantees his own personal intervention to make the words a reality. Which naturally leads us to ask, what happens when God's intervention breaks the normal laws of physics? This brings us to the explicit theological uses of the word, starting with the accounts of miracles.
Miracle accounts are fascinating from a linguistic perspective because they are typically packed with highly kinetic action verbs.
Oh, for sure. People are walking through divided waters, running from fire, striking rocks with staffs, raising their hands to the sky. It's very dramatic.
Well, but the actual supernatural event, the climax of the miracle, the moment the laws of physics are suspended, is described using the seemingly basic verb of being or becoming, hāyâ.
We see this in Exodus 7.10. Moses and Aaron go into Pharaoh's court. Aaron cast down his wooden staff on the stone floor, and the text simply says it became a serpent.
Or in Genesis 19.26, during the destruction of Sodom.
Right. Lot's wife looks back, and she became a pillar of salt. I have to admit, this seems almost too simple.
It feels understated, right?
It really does. If God is transmuting wood into a living reptile, or turning human flesh into sodium chloride, why use the most basic verb in the dictionary? Shouldn't there be a dramatic, specialized Hebrew word for transmogrified or supernaturally altered?
You would think so if the biblical writers were trying to impress us with the mechanics of the event, but they aren't.
They aren't interested in the mechanics.
No, hāyâ is used here because it describes an event that intervenes in earthly affairs to demonstrate absolute sovereign fiat.
Absolute fiat.
It is the raw evidence of God's effective deed. The text does not need to use a flashy, complicated verb to describe the cellular process of how a piece of dead wood turns into a living snake. The sheer fact that it came into existence as a serpent by God's command is the point.
It bypasses the process entirely.
Yes. The hāyâ is the undeniable reality of the new state God has established. When God says something will happen, it bypasses natural law and simply is.
It just comes to be.
It is fiat language. Let there be light, and there was light. It is the language of sudden, instantaneous reality.
That makes total sense. It highlights the outcome over the process, showing that when God decrees a change in reality, the universe does not argue. It just complies. It comes to pass.
There's no resistance.
Right. And this level of staggering certainty carries over into how the prophets and the legal codes use the word, which is the next section in your notes.
The prophets use Hāyâ to announce unexpected, incredible, yet completely certain interventions of God in both judgment and grace.
Like in Zephaniah.
Yeah, look at Zephaniah 2.4. Gaza will be desolate. Or Isaiah 14.24. Truly, as I purposed, so did it come to pass.
When you read the prophets, they are talking about massive geopolitical events. They're talking about armies marching across continents, empires rising, and fortified cities falling.
Huge historical shifts.
Yeah, but they use Hāyâ to show that these are not just human political shifts or military strategies playing out. They're the sovereign interventions of God in history. If God says Gaza will be desolate, the coming to pass of that event is as fixed as gravity.
And we see a parallel usage of Hāyâ determining reality in the legal codes. Look at the first commandment in Exodus 20.3.
The big one.
Right. You shall have no other God beside me. But literally translated, the Hebrew says, there shall not be to you other gods. Or look at Leviticus 19.2, you shall become holy.
Your notes point out that in the law, Hāyâ does not just determine a fact. It demands a legally prescribed behavior. It presses Israel to recognize the reality God has established. But how does a command dictate reality?
Think of it like a courtroom. It goes beyond a simple moral suggestion.
Right, like a judge's gavel falling.
Tell me more about that.
Well, if a judge bangs his gavel and says you're guilty or you are remanded to custody, the judge is not just observing the weather. His words actually create a new legal reality for that person.
Their status changes immediately.
Right. The person's status in society is instantly altered by the spoken decree of the authority figure. So when God says, you shall be holy, it is a command, yes, but is also a declaration of the reality he is bringing about to his people. The gavel has fallen.
That is a great way to put it.
This is the new state of existence for Israel. They are separated, they are set apart.
And that legal structural declaration is the foundation of the covenant formula. The lexical texts you provided point us to verses like Jeremiah 7.23 and 11.4, where we find the core summary of God's relationship with his people.
What's the formula?
The formula is, I will be your God, and you shall be my people.
There is that word again. Hayah. Repeated twice.
It speaks to the active, dynamic character of this mutual relationship. What God and his people are to one another is renewed by acts. God is actively being God to them, protecting them, providing for them, judging their enemies, saving them.
And the people.
And the people are called to actively be his people through obedience and worship. The relationship is a kinetic reality.
I want to stop you right there, because this is a massive point. When you hear, I will be your God, and you shall be my people, it sounds a lot like a standard contract.
A bilateral agreement.
Yeah, it sounds like a 50-50 partnership where both sides have to keep their end of the bargain for the relationship to survive, like a business deal. I will supply the goods, and you will pay the invoice. But your notes state emphatically that this covenant exists only because Yahweh unilaterally established it.
Yes, strictly unilateral.
Can you explain how the grammar proves this isn't a two-way street?
This is where understanding Hāyâ completely reshapes our theology. The covenant formula is frequently transmitted as God's first-person speech. God's Hāyâ, his sovereign promise to be their God, carries the guarantee of all the measures he will use in the future on their behalf.
So he is underwriting the whole thing.
Yes, he is declaring a reality that he himself will maintain. In ancient Near Eastern treaties, you had suzerain vassal treaties, where a great king would conquer a lesser king and dictate the terms.
Right, the bigger king makes the rules.
And the lesser king had to perform to stay alive. But here, the suzerain God is taking the burden of the covenant's success upon himself.
So the covenant's validity does not rest on human perfection. It rests entirely on God's sovereign establishment.
Thank goodness for that.
Right. Because if the survival of the covenant relied on Israel perfectly keeping their end of the bargain, if their Hāyâ had to match God's Hāyâ, the covenant would have shattered within days of them leaving Egypt.
Oh, it would have been over before they even got to the Red Sea.
Exactly. But because God's Hāyâ is the driving force, the relationship is secure. He will act to ensure they remain his people, even if that means he has to use discipline, famine, and exile to bring them to repentance. He will do whatever it takes to maintain the reality he decreed.
Which brings us to the most absolute, staggering theological use of the word Hāyâ in the entire Hebrew Bible. We find it in Exodus 3.14.
The burning bush.
Yes. Let us set the scene. Moses is in the Midianite desert. He sees a bush burning that is not consumed. God speaks to him and tells him to go back to Egypt to confront Pharaoh and free the Israelites. Moses is terrified, and he asks God for his name.
He wants to know who is sending him.
He asks, if they ask me what your name is, what do I say? And God replies, Ehe, Asher, Ehe.
That is usually translated in our English Bibles as, I am, W who I am, or I will be who I will be. This is a massive statement.
The lexical analysis you highlighted notes that this is the absolute use of the word. It is used without a preposition. It is used without a predicate noun. It is God's first-person speech, defining himself entirely by himself.
But let us look at what Moses is actually doing here. Moses is asking for a name. In the ancient Near East, specifically in Egypt where Moses was raised, knowing a God's secret name gave you a measure of leverage over that God.
Yes, names were power.
You could invoke them, summon them, or bind them in spells. Moses wants a handle. He wants a category to put God in.
Exactly. And God refuses to give him a static noun. Instead, he gives him a verb. But I want to address a philosophical assumption people often bring to this verse.
The Greek stuff again.
Yes. Does this phrase just mean God exists in a static, timeless way, completely disconnected from the universe, like Aristotle's concept of the unmoved mover, who just sits outside of time, contemplating his own perfection, totally apathetic to human suffering?
Yes, the old Greek philosophical trap again. If being is static, then I am must mean I exist in a frozen state of absolute perfection.
The syntax and the theology behind the Hebrew words completely dismantle that idea. First, the repetition of the verb is emphatic. Saying it twice underlines the certainty and weight of the statement.
Okay, so Ehe, Asher, Ehe.
Right. Now, the statement certainly includes the idea of God's independent existence. The theological term is his aseity, meaning he depends on nothing else for his existence. He does not draw energy from the universe. He generates it.
He is uncaused.
Yes. But the source material shows it means much more than just a static state of independence.
Because we are dealing with the imperfect tense again, right?
Yes, the verb is in the imperfect tense. As we discussed earlier with the mechanics of a blessing, the imperfect is the tense of action open to new acts. It is forward-looking.
The door is kicked open.
The door is kicked open. Therefore, this name is a proclamation of God's ever-new activity in history. He is saying, I am really and truly present, ready to help and to act as I have always been.
So God offers himself to be known purely as a result of his historical deeds for his people. He is not a static object to be studied under a microscope. He remains a sovereign I and can never be reduced to an it at the disposal of human curiosity.
He refuses to be put in a box.
God replies to Moses with a verb in motion. He is saying, you cannot put a handle on me. You cannot summon me with an incantation. You will know who I am by watching what I do to save my people.
Watch me work.
Watch me dismantle the Egyptian empire. Watch me part the sea. Watch me feed you in the desert. That is who I am.
That captures the essence of the text perfectly. The usage of hayah here stands in the lineage of the miracle reports, the prophetic decrees, and the covenant formula. It encapsulates the ever-renewed activity with which Yahweh intervenes in history to prove himself to be the true Lord.
Let us synthesize all of this, because the ground you sent us on with this one word is massive. Understanding the depths of Hāyâ completely shifts our view of reality. The universe is not a static collection of objects sitting around like props on a dusty stage.
No, it's highly dynamic.
The timeline of history is not a random sequence of arbitrary events. Reality itself is an unfolding sequence of God's sovereign actions. When it rains on a dry field, when a nation rises to power or falls to ruin, when a promise is made to a patriarch, when the covenant is established with a stubborn people. All of it is the dynamic, active Hāyâ of a sovereign God bringing his decrees to pass in space and time.
The lexical evidence demands that we read the entire biblical text with this kinetic lens. God is active, his word is active, history is rushing toward the conclusion he has already established.
Before we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a final thought on a very specific, almost haunting grammatical form of this word found in the lexicons you provided. It is the Niphal form of the verb.
Ah, the Niphal.
We have talked a lot about the active tenses, but we haven't touched on the Niphal yet.
The Niphal is usually a passive or reflexive stem in Hebrew. It describes something happening to the subject.
Right. And your sources note that the Niphal of Hāyâ can mean to be done for or exhausted. We see this starkly in Daniel 8.27.
That is a wild chapter.
It is. Daniel sees a terrifying, overwhelming vision of the future empires clashing, beasts rising, divine judgment falling. And after seeing the sheer scale of God's sovereign timeline, Daniel says, I was exhausted. The Hebrew word he uses is niyeti, derived from that exact same root, Hāyâ.
It literally carries the sense of having come to an absolute end. Your energy is spent, your powers are failing, you are done.
Consider that massive contrast for a moment. Human existence, human strength, human action, it is all strictly finite. We eventually reach an end. We hit a wall, we run out of steam, we enter a state of being exhausted, of being completely done for.
Because we are creatures.
Because we are creatures. But God's Hāyâ, His dynamic, intervening, sovereign existence never ceases. His supply of active being is infinite. He never hits a wall.
He is the one who will be what he will be. He does not run out of being. He does not require sleep. And his decrees never fail from lack of energy.
We started this conversation by comparing the English verb to be to a paused frame and the Hebrew Hāyâ to the movie actually playing out. Here is the reality for you listening. Your own frame will eventually run out of tape. You will hit exhaustion. The Niphal of Hāyâ will come for you.
It comes for all of us.
It does. So I want to leave you with this question based on the incredible sources we looked at today. How does trusting in God's eternal, unceasing Hāyâ, the God whose movie never stops playing, who is always actively intervening to uphold His covenant promises, change the way you view your own limitations today?